What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. This is Headbanging Through It. I'm Jamie. How's everyone doing today? I'm not going to answer that question because I don't feel like it. To be honest, I'm not really having a great week. So, actually, I'm having an absolute shit week. So, I don't want to answer that question, but I am going to talk about it because that's what the podcast is about today. So, let's dive into how I'm doing actually. Yeah, big surprise, you guys. I did not organize myself for this podcast. I'm starting to feel like I just repeat myself over and over and over again. And maybe being back in therapy, my brain will get a little bit more clear as time goes on. You guys are just going to have to put up with me as I sort through all that stuff, I guess. It'll be interesting, I guess, at the very least, to see what kind of shifts and changes happen in my brain over the oncoming weeks. I am going to focus the episode today on cognitive processing therapy again. If you've been listening to the podcast, you guys know I'm back in therapy. I've had a couple of sessions, just had my third session a couple of days ago. I was going to record about it yesterday. However, I kind of fell apart after it, and I'm realizing a lot of things being back in therapy. It's not a bad thing. It's a really good thing. It's just also really hard. So I definitely want to keep talking about the things that I'm going through and what I'm learning through my experience. I also have to remind myself that I need space with it. I know that I need space after therapy, but I guess I don't always acknowledge that sometimes that space that I need like falls into or rolls into the following day and maybe even the day after that, right? So in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'll take the rest of the day. I'll rest. I'll let all the stuff that I went through in counseling today settle. And then by tomorrow, I should be able to talk about it and be clear about it. But that wasn't the case this week. And I feel like that's probably going to ebb and flow and shift as I go through each week, just depending on what we're doing, because I don't know what each week looks like, right? This is a set 12-week program, as I've discussed previously. However, there's not a lot of information about it out there that I've found. And maybe it is that way for a reason. Maybe if you know too much about it, you won't do it. I don't know. I like not actually knowing what's coming next. So if you're someone that prefers that, then maybe these episodes that are going to give you more information about what each week looks like aren't going to be helpful for you. But I also like to have some idea of a general understanding of what's going on. So I guess it just depends on what kind of headspace you're in and what it is that you think you might need or want during, whatever section of healing you're in. And that changes for me anyway, like constantly, absolutely constantly. One day I feel really confident about where I am and my progress. And then the next day I feel like I'm so far away from where I want to be. I'm not going to cry. I might cry. It just is unpredictable, like most of life. Yeah, so this episode, I'm going to do my best to keep it as informative as possible while also like trying to keep it as light as possible for myself because I don't want it to trigger I don't want to trigger myself. I'm also becoming very aware that I need to move through these spaces very delicately and carefully and make sure that I am protected in my own body and mind with where I'm at in my healing and not pushing myself too far into spaces that aren't good for me. I do strongly believe that sharing these stories and talking about the things that we've been through that are hard is a positive and good idea. I think it's healing. I think it helps people. I think coming together in communities where we have shared experiences and understanding of something that we've been through that's similar brings us together as humans. That being said, I have a really delicate nervous system and I know that I do. I also have this personality that's like, it's okay. I'm going to do it. I can just power through it, right? Which is my default, which is kind of what got me into the situation that I'm in now to begin with. So I feel like I get pulled back and forth and then really confused about what the right choice is. And am I doing this because I'm being stubborn or am I doing it because I don't want to give up? Sometimes I don't know the difference between those two things and if I'm doing it for the wrong reasons. I don't know if that makes sense. I just am like this whole week has been really difficult for me to get through for different reasons and different areas of my life of things going on. And then on top of that, a difficult counseling week this week. So not just counseling, but overall just life in general has been a bit stressful with my work and my family this week. So I've been just kind of sitting and trying to work through all the ways that I feel about the session that I just had. I've just been like really fucking sad the last couple days. I cried most of the day after the session, and then the following day for like half of the day. Shut down quite a bit, which is, normal for me when I go into those spaces of like, it's like you strip a piece of yourself away and then you see all the rawness and what's underneath it. And you're like, oh, fuck. And you look at it and you really see what's in there. And although it's like, it can be a little bit scary and you're a little shocked by things that are like existing in there, it's also okay because it's part of who you are. And you know that all of the things that are existing in that space make up a piece of you. But to truly look at it and see it face on for all that it is, and really like opening your mind to understanding that that exists in you, or whatever it is that you're looking at exists in you in the way that it is existing in you, may not be in a like a helpful or healthy way, is just a lot to go through. So, I mean, with that, I guess I can just dig into some of the things that I've been dealing with. I can't remember where I left off in my last session about cognitive processing therapy. I think I talked about how my homework was like to write an impact statement about a traumatic event or like a significant piece of trauma that I went through in my career. And because I had so many, I was just asked to pick one that really stuck out. And so I picked one that was from my earliest years of working in emergency services as a 911 dispatcher. I wrote it all out. I was really proud of myself. I did it like the same night and I was like, I did my homework. I did such a good job. I'm so proud, because avoidance is like one of the number one things that people with PTSD do. When things are hard, we run away from them. That's like very common. So anyway, I was really proud of myself for doing it. I wrote down 3 pages of stuff and I was like, I did it great. I'm ready to go to my next session. And then I showed up at my next session and my counselor was like, okay, you did it. Great. Now I want you to read it to me. And I was like, oh, fuck. Like my jaw actually dropped down and I stared at her. And then I just burst into tears because I was like, I don't want to do that. It was really hard for me to write it. And I'm really proud that I did that. There's no fucking way I want to read it. I don't want to say the words out loud. I don't want to read this to you at all. I don't want to do that. And she just kind of, stared at me reassuringly and waited for me to calm down and sort of regroup. And then I just like took a big breath and I read it and I cried through the whole thing. It was really fucking hard. I did not like it and I did it. And then we went through it all and talked about pieces of it and discussed some things that were in it. And then she went on to talk about like the next part of what she wants to work on with it, which is giving me more homework. The next section of homework that I was asked to complete is some worksheets, and they're called ABC worksheets. I guess what the whole point of this part of it is like, okay, you talk about the event. You don't talk about the event, you write out the event, and you're not actually like asked to provide details of the specific event, just like it's just a write-up of how you felt around the event and like why it happened and what you think happened around it. And I think I read it out in the last podcast, but I'll reread this. The homework was, please write out at least a 1-page statement on why you think your most distressing traumatic event occurred. You are not being asked to write specific details about this event. Write down what you have been thinking about the cause of this event. Anyways, there's another paragraph in there. It's like, talk about this stuff, how it impacted you in these ways. And that's it. So then I did all that. I didn't focus on the details. I focused it on the things that the sheet asked me to focus on. And then I had to read it. And that was awful. And then she gave me more homework. So the homework, the next assignment was something called like, she gave me more handouts. I have a do-a-tang with all my stuff in it that I spilt food on already. So that's how I live my life. I'm always drinking coffee and eating snacks. We talked about what's called stuck points. And I did discuss this, I think, briefly in a couple of my last episodes. But stuck points, I'm going to read some of this stuff out to you guys. So stuck points are like these thought patterns that we have in our brains that don't belong there. That it's like stuff that we have created that's not reality, that we tell ourselves about something. And they're called stuck points because they keep us literally stuck in these spaces of unhealthy thought patterns and telling ourselves things that aren't true, that are like not healthy and not helpful. Stuck points. Okay. I probably will not go through what I'm writing with my own specific stuck points because I don't want to trigger other people and I don't want it to get too detailed. And also, I don't want it to get too personal for me. But I can give you examples that would be like that's something that someone goes through in their everyday life or something like that, and then break it apart that way. So it's not relative to like my job. So there aren't any like red flags or triggers that might come up for anyone listening that has been through, emergency services, post traumatic stress disorder. I don't want to like send anyone into a spiral that, we can avoid. As avoiders, I will help you with that. Okay, what is a stuck point? Stuck points are thoughts that you have that keep you stuck from recovering. These thoughts may not be 100% accurate. Stuck points may be thoughts about your understanding of why the traumatic event happened, thoughts about yourself, others, and the world that have changed dramatically as a result of the traumatic event. Stuck points are concise statements, but they must be longer than one word. Trust is not a stuck point. Stuck points can often be formatted in an if then structure. Here is an example. If I let others get close, then I will get hurt. Stuck points often use extreme language such as never, always, or everyone. What is not a stuck point? Behaviors, feelings. So behaviors example, I fight with my daughter all the time is not a stuck point because it's describing a behavior. Feelings, for example, I'm nervous whenever I go on a date, not a stuck point because it's describing an emotion. Facts, for example, I witness people die, not a stuck point because this is something that actually happened. Questions, for example, what will happen to me is not a stuck point because it is a question. Moral statements, for example, the criminal justice system should always work is not a stuck point because it reflects an ideal standard of behavior. The criminal justice system doesn't work. Just going to add that on there for a fun fact for anyone that didn't know. It doesn't. That might be one of my stuck points. The criminal justice system never works. Okay, here's some examples of stuck points, and I'm not going to read any that may be triggering. It's my fault this happened. Okay, these are all not great. I must be on guard at all times. No one can understand me. Yeah, so those are a few examples of stuck points. So what we were doing was going through the sheet that I wrote out, the impact statement that I wrote out, and kind of like putting notes and circling like thought patterns that came out within that impact statement that my counselor perceived to be potential stuck points, and then going through the list of like what a stuck point is and everything that I just went through, and then providing me with worksheets to go through. So then I had to pull out some of those stuck points and create a list. And so I have a stuck point log. So together we pulled out some of them and we wrote them down. And then I was asked to, as I go through my next week, if something came up in my everyday life, in my thought processing, and I felt something or I recognized something that was a potential stuck point, that I should write it down. And so I did that. I filled out whole one side and half of another side. And then from there, I was also supposed to focus on the traumatic events or traumatic event, depending on whatever way that you're doing it, and pull stuff that were stuck points from my traumatic events and put them on the sheet. And the assignment was to do at least one worksheet based on the traumatic event and then go through it, and then other things as they came up in my daily life. I was asked to do one every day for the following week. I did not successfully do that. I found it really hard. I definitely like hardcore avoided it. I was not having a great time with it. Every time I thought about doing it, I was like, oh, maybe tomorrow. For the first couple of days I did great. I was like, yeah, I'm going to get on it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to like make sure that I do my homework, because I really do actually I like assignments. I really enjoyed being in school for the most part. I like, like small attainable goals. It helps me feel like I have focus on something, and my focus is so scattered all the time in my life now that if I can do small things successfully, then I feel like I've done something that is like rewarding to me in my personal life, because I feel like so much of my life is not like that. Anyways, I'll show you one of the worksheets. So this is what the worksheet looks like. It says it's like A, B, C. So there's 3 columns. The first column says activating event. The second column says belief/stuck point. And then the third column says consequence. C, section C, consequence. I feel something. So what is the feeling? So we have to break the stuck points into 3 sections. And the first part is just like writing down what happened that created the thought. So, for example, I mean, if you're a parent, you'll understand this. My kids don't listen to me, right? Like, I ask them 25 times to clean up their mess and they ignore me. So, that happens. And then the stuck point or belief surrounding that might be nobody listens to me. Nobody cares about me. I'm invisible. I know that for me personally in my life, I do have invisibility issues with not being acknowledged in my career for so long, just from my PTSD and how it impacted me. I still don't have acknowledgement from that. The last 10 years, I've just been by myself, floating through this healing process on my own, trying to figure out what the fuck to do and how to do it without any support whatsoever. So sometimes for me, actually, this is real, right? Like when my kids don't listen to me, I go into a spiral of like, nobody gives a shit. I'm invisible, blah, blah. So I tell myself something. I tell myself that I'm invisible. And then the consequence to that is I feel something. What's the feeling associated to the things you're telling yourself? So if I'm telling myself, nobody listens to me, nobody gives a shit, I'm invisible, what am I feeling in that? Well, I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling shame, like I'm not good enough, and guilty. She also gave me, because this is confusing and my brain can't retain information for like a super long periods of time. My memory is really bad. She also gave me, there's also a sheet that has like the different types of emotions on it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There's angry, guilty, happy, proud, scared, disgusted, sad, ashamed. Okay, so when I tell myself that nobody listens to me and nobody cares, I feel ashamed, slightly embarrassed, right? I'm angry for sure, sad. So then basically, like, I have to write down all the feelings that are associated to that stuck point of what I'm telling myself. So if I'm writing down sad, ashamed, angry, whatever else comes up, and then you write them in that last column. And then at the bottom, you're supposed to go through it. And there's a couple of questions to answer at the bottom. And it says, are my thoughts above in column B realistic and or helpful? So when I tell myself I'm invisible, no one gives a shit about me, is that realistic and is it helpful? Well, is it realistic? Of course my kids give a shit about me. Of course they fucking love me. My kids are amazing. So is that realistic? No. Are they having a moment where they're just being fucking kids? Yes. Is it helpful that I'm telling myself that they don't give a shit about me? Absolutely not. So we talk about that, right? And discuss like, is this thought process helpful to you? And when your kids aren't listening to you and your brain jumps to like, nobody cares about me, you know, she wants to discuss like how big of a jump it is from them not listening to me telling myself, nobody cares. There's like lots of pieces that we did through this with my trauma pieces and the information and the thought processing around like the traumatic events that I've been through in my job. We have only touched on like a couple of them because I didn't do my homework very well and I didn't complete the assignment in the way that she asked me to. And I only did like 4 of them and I was supposed to do like 7 or 8. And I was okay with that. I was just like, it is what it is. I felt like it was really difficult for me to even get those like those 4 down. And I was just like, this has to be enough because I felt like I was at max capacity with just that. And she did say that like a lot of people doing these assignments like don't complete them. That made me feel a little bit better, but also like a little bit sad because how do we get better if we are constantly avoiding doing the things that are going to help us? I get kind of like stuck in these cycles too of like, I want to run away and I don't want to do it. And then I know that it's going to be good for me and I need to just like step into it and be okay with it. And then back again in that space of like, I can do hard things. I can power through it because I'm strong. But then also telling myself and being a little bit afraid of like, well, I pushed through hard things and that is how I ended up with PTSD. So I feel like I get so overwhelmed and confused about, okay, this is good for me, right? Like this is not something that's going to harm me. But when you also step into a space where you have to face the things that have harmed you, it's hard not to feel like you're going to be harmed again. It's a lot. And telling myself that I'm okay, that I'm safe in this space and that this is a healthy space to be in and a healing space to be in is like really important. And I'm just getting used to like being back in these areas of feeling like I can heal further and I can keep moving forward and I can find those pieces of light and bring them in. But it's just like tiny, tiny steps, like one tiny step at a time and like getting through the day. And then my favorite part of my day is like falling into bed and finally shutting my brain off for the day and finding some solace, right? Like finding some peace and quiet and like not having to worry about all the stresses that I go through in my life and how bad my anxiety is going to be and if my chest pain is going to like follow me through, the whole day or just half of the day or just an hour. Anyways, what was I talking about? I know I was at this worksheet. Oh, okay. So that was the first line. So you do column A, column B, column C, and then is this thought process realistic or helpful? And then underneath that, what can you tell yourself on such an occasion in the future? So the next time I tell my kids to do something and they don't listen to me, which is every fucking day of my life, instead of going to complete self-destruction mode of like, nobody gives a shit about me. So together we would work through that and try to find a way and find a different thought to put in place of that one. So not I'm invisible, nobody gives a shit about me. Something like, okay, my kids are being kids. It's normal for kids to be only focused on their own fucking shit and not anything else going on around them. Their brains are underdeveloped and they're just like tiny little busy creatures. So it's not about me. My kids are just being kids. It's not about them not caring about me. Sometimes kids are dick. Kids are kids. It's not just my kids that aren't listening to me. It's everyone's fucking kids that aren't listening to their parents, right? Like I'm not the exception. And it is not about me as a person that they don't listen to me. So telling myself and messaging myself that like sometimes kids are just assholes and then acknowledging the actual regular feelings that would be associated to something like that and acknowledging that having those feelings is okay, right? Like being annoyed by my kids not listening to me is a normal reaction. I can be annoyed. I can acknowledge that I am annoyed by that situation. And if I'm adding anything on top of that, like shame or guilt, and then messaging myself things about myself that aren't real in that situation, then I'm creating an unhealthy like visualization and an unrealistic description of myself. So hopefully that makes sense. That was like the best example that I could think of that would be like something for most people in their everyday life. If you don't have kids, I'm sure there's someone in your life that doesn't fucking listen to you that you can relate that to in your own way. Just because something happens in your world doesn't mean that it's all on us, right? Like I jump to worst case scenario constantly in my life. And that is a big piece of my post-traumatic stress disorder that I want to work on. I don't want to default to like catastrophe all the time and chaos. That's not how I want to exist. I broke down in my counseling session because of that. I don't want to keep existing like this. And writing this stuff down as it comes up, like I wrote it all down and then we kind of like went through the last two stages together and like broke it down and found a different like thought pattern that we could rework into it together. And that was really helpful. And also it was me acknowledging that this is how I speak to myself in my head and that these are the thought processes that I have about myself as a human, as a mom. It's really hard to acknowledge that that space is in my mind and also really good because I want to do better. I want to be better and I want to exist as a better human in this world. I want my kids to know who I really am underneath all of that shit. I don't want to be sad about it. And also it is sad. I'm finding this stage of it really hard. So that was like session 2 was doing these assignments. And then when I went back a couple of days ago, we went over the ones that I did. And then she pointed out that I didn't do any of them about any traumatic events at all, which I didn't notice. And I didn't purposely, well, I might have, maybe subconsciously I avoided it. We did one together in our session the week before. And so I was like, we did one together. So that's good enough. I don't need to do anymore. But she was like, no, I wanted you to do more on your own. And I didn't acknowledge that. And I didn't do that. And I only focused on things that were going on in my everyday life with my thought patterns. So after we went through the ones that I did, she told me we're going to do this for another week. And then I cried some more because I was like, fuck, I knew that was coming because it was really hard and I didn't want to do it. And then I didn't do all of it. And then I wondered before I went into my session with her if it was going to be like extended. It's 2 weeks of this process and it's the same for everybody. So if you think that you're going to get away with 1 week of, doing the minimum and then being done with it, that is not how it is. There's more. And I think that the reason that they do 2 weeks of this is because it is so hard. And it also is a really detrimental part of this process that it shifts your brain into recognizing these things in these patterns that you're stuck in and then breaking them apart and then reworking them. And I think that is really fundamental with a lot of traumatic events and trauma and even just negative thought patterns in general, and like some of the things that we create in our minds about things. Is it is something that probably all of us do on a regular basis in our life, is just like creating things that aren't real, right? Like, we're not responsible for other people's emotions, and how someone feels about a situation is not it's not up to us to make them feel better about it, you know? If you don't like something that's going on around you, that's just part of life, right? Like, you can't always change all the things that are happening, and we're not responsible for others' emotions. We're responsible for our own emotions. And taking that on and telling ourselves things about something that aren't real is just like, it's exhausting. Realizing that I do that on a regular basis is really fucking hard to look at. It's really hard to acknowledge. It's really hard to accept. Wow, I'm really doing that all the time. And then how does that impact my kids? And how does that impact my husband and our relationship? Is this what I'm teaching them? And is this how I'm showing up in my world with my friendships and my relationships with my family and the people that I love? You know, I'm in my 40s. I've been doing this for fucking ever. And I know that I need to give myself some grace and some space to settle into the fact that I've been through a lot and my environment impacted me in ways that I didn't have control over and that I didn't have understanding of for a very long time. Now that I am in a space where I can look at it, I can learn from it, I am slowly and consciously doing the work to heal, and I want to be better. And that in itself is a really big deal, because it is hard to show up for yourself in those ways and to step into those spaces that are hard to be in, to better yourself, not just for the people around you, but for yourself. I want to get back to the person that I was before I was so overwhelmed and taken down by all of this stuff. And no, it does not define who I am as a human. And I wouldn't have become the person that I am today if I didn't go through all of those things. So there's lots of pieces to it, right? It's not just like one thing in one way and looking at it in one way, or not acknowledging parts of it, right? I want to acknowledge all of the things and all of the ways that I am without it becoming consuming or without it taking over my life. It's not my existence, you know? There are lots of pieces of who I am as a human. The things that drive me and the ways that I exist now have a lot to do with those paths that I was on previously. It's a lot to look at, and there's pieces of my history that I have not wanted to look at for a very long time that now I know I'm going to have to. And I'm okay with that. I think I'm a little bit stressed out about it. And I also know that at the end of the day, it is going to be good for me. So I have to just keep telling myself, this is going to be good for you. This is going to be good for you. You've got this. And I've got this, right? I can do hard things, and I can stand in my power and understand that I'm not forcing myself to do something that is bad for me. This is a space for me to exist in, that I can come out the other side stronger and better. It's a lot. Anyways, so now I finished my session with her a couple days ago. Had a big spiral about all the things that I do on a regular basis that are not healthy for me, and feeling all of the ways that I have been impacted without being too hard on myself, you know, like not attaching that shame to it and guilt to it, but just like being okay with grieving a little. After you grieve the loss of something, you can sort of help build yourself back up in some way and move forward and let some new growth spark, and hopefully something will shift. So that is where I'm trying to keep my headspace. I have been a little grumpy, and I think that is just part of trying to work through it. So I have to do more of these. I don't want to do it. It's not very fun. I have been very resistant, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to get all 7 of them done this week. That is my goal. And I want to show up for myself. I want to be ready to get to the next stage. I had a little bit of a like overwhelming moment knowing that I'm only in week 3 and there's 12 weeks of this, and I don't know how the fuck I'm going to get through it. I feel like that is so far away from where I am now, and what is coming next, I don't know. And I have a lot of fear around that because it is hard. It is hard work to do the work. And I've said that before. I'll say it probably in my next podcast. And I'm just going to keep moving through it. And I will give you guys updates on what's coming next. If things get a little bit like overwhelming or I feel a little lost in where I am with the process, I might take a break and put some space between the next podcast that I do about this, just depending on how I am. I'll let you guys know. I don't want to put too much pressure on myself. I also don't want to move and push myself into spaces where I feel like I'm having a setback or that it's just not healthy for me. And I just don't always know. I really just don't always fucking know. And I'm just learning to be a little bit more gentle with myself and try to remember that I am just a human and I'm just like trying to figure it out. Sometimes you just have to dip your toe in to see if the water is too hot or too cold before you jump in. I think being a little bit cautious of where I'm at is a good thing for me. I don't want to run away scared, but I also don't want to dive in head first without thinking about what I'm doing. I'm just like still searching around to find post-traumatic stress disorder support for anyone that worked in emergency services. I did find a couple of social media groups online. I think one is more based in the United States, so it's not really relative to Canada, but I have had a couple of really positive interactions, and I think that that's been really good for me. Feeling unseen is a big deal when you're going through stuff like this. You feel lonely. Loneliness is the worst part of it. Yes, I do have people around me that love me and that support me. However, if you haven't been through something like that, it's really hard to relate on the same level. Yes, they relate to me emotionally and they've all been through hard things too, and they understand what that's like, and we're all human and we can connect on that. It's a very specific type of world and space in the emergency services line of work. It truly does help to be able to connect with other people that have actually been through the very same experience or very similar, because there's so many layers to it too, and just so many moving parts and things that you can't explain to someone that hasn't been in that. I feel like it's been really helpful to have that so far. I also have worry about being too pulled into that space and then letting it take over my world. I don't want to be pulled into a space where it just like takes over, right? Like having space away from that, like I am doing this podcast, and then if I'm in these groups, I don't want it to be something that is like an overwhelming part of my life. I have a family, I have a business, I have lots of other things that I would like to put my focus on that are good for me. So prioritizing and making sure that I'm not doing too much of one thing, and like I just don't always know what the right answer is, right? Because it feels like it's helpful, but then also, is it helpful? I don't know. I'm questioning everything now. I just feel like I don't know what's right and what to do. I know I've always said I don't have the answers and I don't know what I'm doing, but I feel that even like on a deeper level this week than I have before. Like, I don't know where the fuck I am. I feel like I'm on a tiny sailboat in the middle of the ocean and I don't even know what fucking sea I'm floating on. Where am I? If you can relate to that, send me a message. Maybe we can talk about where we are in this world. Anyways, I don't have a lot of fire in me today. I feel a little bit disconnected and a little bit lost in what's going on with my therapy. So if you pick up on that, that's just why. I don't want to not do the podcast. I feel like it's important to get the information out for you guys. And I just don't know what I'm going to be like week to week. And you guys are just going to have to put up with me as I go through it. Anyways, I think that is like all that I had to talk about with what we went through in therapy. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to reach out to me. If there's something that I missed or I didn't touch base on that you have a question about, just let me know. If you're interested in doing something like this and you have any questions or feedback or anything you want to talk to me about, feel free to reach out to me. Yeah, I'm just going to keep sharing it around and hopefully, it reaches somebody that needs it. I think that's it. I don't really have anything else that I wanted to touch base on. I don't think mental health wise, my anxiety has just been like on a different level this week. I hit some really peak anxiety moments that weren't great. And then that was before my therapy session. So I feel like I went up really high this week and now I'm just kind of like slowly coming out of that. I think if you go through stuff like that on a regular basis, like once you start coming out of that, it just feels like you want to go to bed for a week. And that's where I'm at. So the fact that I'm doing this podcast today is a miracle. Hopefully I covered all the things that I wanted to, and I'll try to be a little bit more upbeat on my next podcast, you guys. I'll try to have a little bit more zing in me and maybe crack some jokes. Today, I'm just like here. That's where I'm at. That's the update for today. And that's all that I have for this week, you guys. And I will keep you posted on how things go. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for continuing to support me through these podcasts. I'll see you next time and we'll headbang through some more stuff.